Hello, everyone, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. As always, I hope you had a fantastic day today. Well, here at Senior Living Live, our goal with these webinars is to provide our viewers with facts and information. And right now, I can't think of anything more important than arming everyone with the facts surrounding these coronavirus vaccines currently on the market. There's a lot of information floating around, but what is fact and what is fiction? Well, today we've partnered with Dr. Ryan Haumschild, Director of Pharmaceutical Services for Emory Healthcare. He is here to give us the straight facts regarding the current coronavirus vaccines, those that will be coming on the market very soon. He is also here to answer your questions and address any comments and concerns you might have. Now, remember, in the webinar, throughout the presentation, all audio and video lines will be muted. So if you have a question, and of course, we want you to be a part of the conversation, you can scroll down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. You can type out your question there, your comments, concerns. I would advise doing that early and often, and we will get to those at the end of Dr. Haumschild's presentation. So with that, Dr. Haumschild, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate that introduction, and thank you all for hosting me today. This is something that's really near and dear to my heart as a healthcare professional, and these are really my personal views, almost as a scientist and a healthcare professional around COVID and understanding what are the facts and what are the things to look out for. So hopefully over the next 30 to 35 minutes, I can give you a background on the COVID-19 vaccine, some of the things that we've worked on in development, dispel some of the rumors, and let's talk about what does the future have in store for us? And is there light at the end of that tunnel? So again, I'm going to review some of the science, really go through it at a high level of what was the process in developing this vaccine and what is that things that we need to be aware of. Discuss the differences between the available vaccines, which I know is important, especially as there's more than one on the market and there's actually more coming down the line. We want to understand what is that effectiveness and what are these side effects that you're hearing about. I think everyone has some personal experiences they can relate to. You might hear from a friend, a coworker, or a family member. What are you going to expect? And what should you know about these side effects? And lastly, why is it so important? And why is the CDC and why is everyone saying, let's get vaccinated? And I want to talk through that importance of really what it means to you and your loved ones. So as we begin today, I really want to review what has been COVID-19's impact in 2020. I know many of us look back at 2020 and think, wow, I'm so glad that year's behind us. It could have been a tough year for yourself. You could have had loved ones get sick. Unfortunately, could have lost loved ones, but also just an interruption to our daily lives. The way we communicate, the way we interact, everything changed. And really, when we look back at the COVID-19 cases, we approached about 100 million confirmed cases worldwide. And of those 100 million, we had around 2 million deaths reported. When we focus in specifically on the United States, we had over 23 million cases of COVID-19 that were confirmed. And really, when you look at it and you look at the data for public health, you can find that COVID-19 was the third leading cause of death in the US in 2020. Now, we know there's precipitating events, comorbidities, other health conditions that can come up because of COVID, but these are COVID-related deaths that were reported. We know that 1 in 990 Americans have died from COVID-19. And when we really focus on a population that's near and dear to my heart, is those over 65, 1 in 200 of those have died that were infected by COVID-19. Lastly, about 1 in 1,500 of those greater than 25 is currently in the hospital. And that's why it's so important. And you hear our healthcare professionals saying, take steps to minimize the risk of the spread. Wear your mask, socially distance, get vaccinated, because right now our hospitals are surging with COVID positive patients or patients that need our care. And if our healthcare workers are being infected and we don't have enough beds, unfortunately, that's going to lead to worse health outcomes and at worst, people dying that could otherwise be treated. I'm going to move on here to really show you the statewide COVID hospitalization. Now, as Melissa introduced myself, I actually do practice, and I live here in Atlanta, Georgia. That's really one of the epicenters, I would say, of the country. And we look at the current hospitalizations by day in Georgia. And you can see on the left side of the graph, you have April of 2020. On the right side, you have January, just really recently, January of 2021. And it really shows what's our 7-day rolling average in current hospitalizations. And you can see, unfortunately, we've seen a peak, and now we're continuing to see that peak rise more and more. COVID-19 is spreading quickly, it's affecting many, and it's something that we really have to be careful of for our own employees and also for our loved ones. So let's take steps to learn more about the vaccine and figure out, is this the right solution for myself and others? And can we do our part in stopping the spread? So I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into COVID-19. I recognize some of you may have a scientific background, some of you may not, but many of you have seen kind of this picture of what the COVID-19 looks like. If we really kind of zoom in on this virus, we can see that there's the E protein, the S protein, and the M protein that make up the exterior of the virus. We're really going to focus on the S protein, which is what you've heard commonly referred to in the media and maybe even with your healthcare professionals as the spike protein. It's really unique to this molecule, and it's something that you really want to figure out, how do we target that to create some future innovation? So when you think about the COVID-19 development, you may wonder, who was responsible for developing the vaccine? How did it come about? I've heard this is recent technology. If it's so new, can we really trust it? Well, I want to introduce you to two of the main researchers at the NIH that have been working on a coronavirus mRNA vaccine for over, I want to say, 5 years. I know Dr. Corbett is rather young scientist. She comes in as one of the main leading female scientists. Only at age 34, she's accomplished an incredible amount of work studying coronaviruses and mRNA virus vaccines for these viruses. And then Dr. Graham is the deputy director at the NIH Vaccine Research Center, and his team has been leading a lot of innovative work and studies around the virus. So to put it in short, coronavirus vaccines using mRNA technology is not new. It's been utilized in several other disease states, and now we were really prepped and lucky that this research was ongoing so that when the COVID-19 broke out, as you know, there's several coronaviruses. COVID-19 is a specific coronavirus. We're able to leverage the technology and the work that the NIH has been doing to really hyper-focus in on this type of treatment. So when we move forward, I want to show you what is the spike protein. I know I mentioned this to you earlier, but a spike protein is really where your body can attach an antibody and really minimize that SARS-CoV-19 coronavirus. And that's really what I like to think of as a pharmacist and a scientist, is really that target that we're aiming for. If we can attach onto that spike protein, we can really create a way to minimize COVID-19 spread and let the body's natural immune system take over and render that COVID-19 virus really inactive in our body. So I really want to talk about the coronavirus, but now I want to talk about the mRNA vaccine. I know initially when this came out, people were like, mRNA, is it going to change my body? What is it all about? Well, mRNA is messenger RNA. It's not DNA, and it never goes into the nucleus of a cell. mRNA is really that communication pathway that lets your body know, okay, this is something that's foreign to me that I need to mount an immune response. So what they did with the mRNA vaccine is they isolated a portion of the mRNA out of the coronavirus. Let me be very clear in that they did not take the virus and put it into the vaccine. So you cannot get sick of the virus by using the vaccine. They only took a small portion of the messenger RNA so that your body would know, hey, messenger RNA is telling me to attack this spike protein. And it's basically passing on that message so your body knows what to attack and to do it most efficiently. So when we build this mRNA vaccine, we go ahead and encapsulate that mRNA in really a lipid sphere. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit further in the study. But what it is, it's a way that you can deliver the mRNA to the body. Your body will uptake the mRNA, and the mRNA quickly degrades, but then your body remembers it needs to attack the spike protein. It can mount an immune response using your T killer cells and antibodies, et cetera, to attack that coronavirus. And that's the way you train your body and educate it on what to look out for. And that way it can kill and get rid of that coronavirus most effectively. So as we look at this right now, we know we get it injected into our arm, into the muscle, and that vaccine triggers the production of the spike protein and antibodies specific to it. It's a quick and easy way to do it. But one of the things to keep in mind, as I mentioned, mRNA never really enters the nucleus of the cell. And actually, mRNA degrades very quickly. And that's why you might have heard with the Pfizer vaccine, it's stored at -80 degrees. And the Moderna vaccine has to be frozen or refrigerated, and they have very limited stability at room temperatures. As a matter of fact, when we draw up the doses of the vaccine, we've got to give them within 6 hours of their beyond use date. Otherwise, no longer will the vaccine be as effective because of that rapidly degrading mRNA. And one thing to touch on that I talked about previously with the team that was studying this vaccine at the NIH is this has been pursued for Zika, rabies, influenza, and cancer. So mRNA vaccines are nothing new. They've been around for years. However, leveraging that technology, leveraging that expertise for the coronavirus was really where the innovation started. So one of the other questions that we commonly get that I think is so important to talk about is, why is 2 shots? I get my flu vaccine in 1 shot. Why am I getting 2 shots? And why do I have to space it out? Well, the first shot, when we think about a series of vaccinations, is referred to as the primer. In the previous slide, I told you it's teaching the body about a spike protein, about the coronavirus, and what to attack. The primer helps the body recognize the virus and get the immune system ready. We know after we give that first vaccine, and I'll just use Pfizer as an example, once you get the first vaccine, about a week later, you're 52% effective after the first dose compared to placebo. So placebo means people that did not get the vaccine versus those that got the vaccine and then were exposed to the COVID-19 virus. About 52% of them were able to mount an immune response and attack it. Well, that's always effective, but the best way to get the most immune response and coverage is do a second shot with a booster. So the first one gets your immune system primed and ready, and the second, the booster, actually allows your immune system to mount an incredible response. Because it's seen it before and it sees it again, it can be that much more effective. It allows your immune system to be strengthened to detect it right away. And actually, if you look 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks after you get that second vaccine for Moderna or Pfizer, you have about 95% effectiveness that even if you were to contract the COVID-19 virus, you would not have any symptoms and your body would be able to get rid of it and move on. So that's something that's really important to call out. And I think it's really exceptional that we've gotten to this point so soon. So people have been asking me, and actually I think Melissa and I had a talk about this in our primer to this is, there's a lot of vaccines coming. What makes them so unique? What are the differences? And I really want to focus in on that because I think it's so important for you all to learn. I've highlighted in this red box here the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. If you look at these 2 vaccines, they're very specific to the mRNA. And really using that messenger RNA to spread the message to your immune system and what to go after. You can see other vaccines are on here. They're getting ready to be produced, most notably AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. And they use kind of a different mechanism where they take basically a weak virus, it could be adenovirus, they put the COVID-19 DNA within that virus, and it allows your body to do the same thing as mount an immune response, but it's kind of a different pathway of doing it. Some of the benefits of this is it may not have to be refrigerated the same way or frozen storage. Sometimes you can do it in 1 dose, sometimes you can do it in 2 doses, and you'll see some of the other pharmaceutical companies are even working on reducing the amount of freezing. It actually can be stored in a refrigerator. And this is really important for developing nations. We know that mRNA technology is great, but like I said earlier, it rapidly degrades. So how do we come up with different types of vaccines that can still give the same immune response, but don't have the same cold storage requirements? So moving back to the talk, let's talk about Moderna and Pfizer. Both work really well. Both have efficacy around 95%, and both are 2 doses. One of the differences with Moderna is that you take it within 28 days apart, give or take. You can take it about 4 days early in each of them. And then with the Moderna vaccine, I said 28 days, but with the Pfizer, it can be 21 days or to the 17 is the soonest you want to take it. That way you give your body a time to mount a response, before you give the second dose. And there's actually studies going on right now that you can push that second dose even out further than 28 and 21 days. And I think there should be some studies that will be giving more information on that in the next month or so. Again, we talked about storage. The Moderna vaccine is usually frozen, but it can be refrigerated for 30 days. And that's a freezer that really sits there but at that -20 mark, where with the Pfizer vaccine, we have to store it at -70 degrees, and it's good with 5 days refrigeration. So as you hear about people rolling out these vaccine clinics and trying to get the doses exactly right, we want to waste as little as possible, because once we draw doses out of that vial, those doses only have 6 hours and we can't use them anymore. And again, once we take those vials from that deep freeze or that freezer, we only have either 5 to 30 days with Moderna. So we really have to be good stewards of the product that we receive. And there's a lot of planning that goes into this. One of the things too that I hear a lot that I feel like I want to address is, well, it got rolled out so quickly. How could this be safe? Did they skip steps? Well, with Operation Warp Speed, there's actually no steps skipped. What they did is actually condense the process. And you can see in the flow chart here that typically it could take 73 months for completion, but instead they created an accelerated process where what they did is they hedged their risk and started producing vaccine even before the clinical trial results were done. And that was a huge risk, because they would, if the clinical trials didn't come back good, none of that vaccine could be used and it would all have to be thrown away. However, in this situation, because it was such a pandemic and public health crisis, they went ahead and hedged their bets, started creating vaccine before the results were done. And it actually paid off, because the clinical trial data came back favorable. And that way they were instantaneously able to roll it out. Another thing is we've worked on creating emergency use. And so right now, the COVID-19 vaccine for both Moderna and Pfizer are being distributed under the emergency use provision, meaning that more data will continue to come in. FDA approval is probably imminent, but right now, this accelerated pathway was approved due to emergency use without skipping any steps to make sure that we could tackle this health crisis as soon as possible. So we've talked about the virus, we've talked about the storage, but I started wanting to get into these side effects. And one of the things I really want to differentiate from everyone is reactogenicity. So that's your reaction to the vaccine versus actually a safety event, because I think they're two separate things. And I want to educate us all about that. Reactogenicity is something you will see all the time. It's your body's way of mounting an immune response against the vaccine. And really, in my opinion, it's showing that it's working. And this can vary from people having a sore arm, you can have muscle pain, you can be fatigued, have a headache, potentially some nausea, vomiting, or a fever. But all of these are natural responses to your body being exposed to a new vaccine, recognizing it has to mount an immune response because it's about to prepare for a new pathogen or a new virus. And this is how your body kind of naturally goes through the process to get ready. This is nothing that we wouldn't expect from any type of virus. It happens all the time with the flu, and it's usually transient, lasting maybe for a day, maybe up to a few days, and then kind of your body gets back to normal. When you have a safety event, that's an adverse reaction. That's when your body could have some type of anaphylactic shock, where you might have a swollen throat, you might break out in big hives, or there might actually be something that happens much more severe. And it's important that you separate the two when you're referring to the vaccine, because overall these vaccines are very safe. However, they have reactogenicity, which we would consider normal and part of the normal pathogenicity or normal process of the body getting ready to prepare immune response. This one is a great chart. I love it. I reference it, and actually got to give credit to another MD that put this out here on the vaccine side effects and really comparing them. People always ask me, what's the difference between Moderna and Pfizer? To me, very few differences, both great vaccines, both 94 to 95% effectiveness. There's some storage differences, maybe some differences in time between the first and second dose. And there's a little bit of difference here on the side effects, but I want to go through it with you all so you can really take time to understand it. If you can see my slides on the left, number 1 is Shingrix that we get for the shingles vaccine. 2 is Moderna COVID-19. 3 is the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. And then the last one is a flu vaccine. And what it does is it shows the differences in that reactogenicity that I just spoke about between local pain, redness, swelling, myalgia, fatigue, headache, chills. And you can see that Moderna vaccine does slightly have more of a headache, probably more of a fatigue, more local pain than the Pfizer vaccine. But when you break it down, it's about a 10% difference, which could be clinically and statistically significant, but very similar. But when you compare it to the flu vaccine, you have a lot of those same things, but to a lesser extent. However, when we look at the shingles vaccine, that's probably the biggest comparator. And actually, the way people respond and that reactogenicity is similar to the shingles vaccine. And actually, if you break down the overall side effects, shingles has more of a reactogenicity compared to the COVID vaccines and the flu vaccine. So for me, some of you might have had all four of these vaccines in your life. Many of us get the flu on an annual basis, but I think it helps level set expectations to what's currently on the market and kind of current a standard of care and how the COVID-19 vaccines fit into this grouping. So what are some vaccine safety considerations? We know that COVID's new, but late and long-term side effects of vaccines are not entirely known. And you'll hear say, well, I'm thinking about getting the vaccine, but I don't know about the side effects. They haven't been able to study it long enough. Well, that can be true. Studies are going to be ongoing. And as we know, we did Operation Warp Speed to roll this out. But it is well known that late to long-term side effects with vaccines, they're not really a thing. The vaccine material degrades rapidly, and what remains is that immunologic memory. And so the severe risk of an outcome of having something with the COVID-19 vaccine would be very quickly, actually almost immediately within that 15-minute observation period. Outside of that, with other vaccines, there's never been any long-term effects. And as we talked about earlier, the mRNA is really a messenger and it degrades rapidly, never even makes it into the nucleus. So there's no long-term side effects to be worried about due to the mechanism of this vaccine delivery. Another common misconception and safety consideration, the vaccine makes people sick. We talked about this earlier. The vaccine actually does not contain the virus, only a portion of the messenger RNA, and that cannot get you sick or transmit the virus. And we know that there's transient symptoms of reactogenicity, and it just means that your immune system is working, and it doesn't make you necessarily sick. I will say some colleagues, even in the medical field, have said they've had flu-like symptoms the day afterwards. I personally have received both vaccines, the first and the second vaccine, and I'm 3 weeks out from receiving them. And I had minimal to no response. I think after my second vaccine, I felt a little bit more tired and went to bed a little bit earlier. But other than that, I was fine. But there are some people that may have more of a response, and that's actually okay. It shows their body's working through it. And we've actually learned that people that have been infected by the COVID-19 virus, when they have that second vaccine, will sometimes mount even more of an immune response and may have a little more of symptoms, but still the data is coming in. So we're hopeful that 7.7 billion people will be vaccinated, but some will experience side effects and some will have anaphylaxis, but typically that happens immediately after. And also when we've seen the studies, we've seen that those people that have had that anaphylaxis, it's typically been, they've had anaphylactic in the past to other medications or vaccines. And so when you see it rolled out at your county health center, at your hospital, people actually check, have you had an anaphylactic reaction before? And they'll actually have a longer observation period. So we're doing everything possible to do it in a safe kind of construct as possible. Some other things, mRNA vaccines are new. Shouldn't we have more safety data? What is this unique mechanism of delivery of the vaccine? Well, we talked about it, but over 70,000 people have already received this vaccine in clinical trials with no safety issues seen besides reactogenicity. We talk about anaphylaxis, but no long-term issues. Over 11 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been already given in the US without any unexpected severe complication or vaccine-related deaths outside of anaphylactic and things that we've been able to see. But after those 11 million doses, during that same time period over the last month or so, since the COVID vaccine has been approved, we've had almost 100,000 people in the US have died from COVID. So we've had 0 deaths due to the COVID vaccine, due to true side effects, yet we've had 100,000 people actually die from the COVID-19 vaccine. So I think that's really important to clear up and speak to. Does the mRNA alter DNA? You guys heard me say this before, but I want to address it again. Absolutely not. The mRNA causes the cell to make the COVID S protein, that spike protein, and attach to that protein, and it degrades very quickly after that. These vaccines were developed at warp speed. They can't be safe. I went through and kind of discussed that. No safety steps were skipped to develop these vaccines. If anything, these manufacturers and the government and World Health Organization actually just kind of put out more risk that they were going to have loss if they produced something that didn't have great scientific data behind it in the clinical trials. So this is a slide that I really like to share with you all, and it's debunking the myths. And I think I've debunked the myths to an extent, but I want to go through this because Sanford Health put this together, and I really like the visual. So we talked about it was rushed, it wasn't safe. We talked about that. It changes your DNA. It can give you COVID-19. It contains eggs. No, it does not. It causes severe side effects. Again, for most, the vaccine causes mild side effects, and this is that reactogenicity. And one of the other things is that really I hadn't talked about much is it can make women infertile. There's no evidence that the vaccine causes infertility. And one of the things I'll even put out there is right now there's been it has not been studied extensively in pregnant females, but I know that several individuals that are pregnant have decided to move forward with the vaccine because there's not a lot of data out there, but actually some of the leading OBs that I know have recently published data, and some of the leading OBs actually will leave it up to an individual's choice, but some of them are recommending it for their patients and to avoid kind of the negative side effects of contracting COVID-19 and then giving birth, or having it while you're trying to give birth, and some of the I guess I would say difficulties that can come up during that. So these are the vaccine myths. I really want to debunk them. There's a lot of myths out there. Obviously, there's things to go in eyes wide open. Obviously, you want to look at data. You want to be cautious, but make sure to do the homework. And hopefully I can be a part of that journey for you. So as we transition here, what do we do about these new COVID-19 strains that are being discovered? And this is great. And I know this came in earlier from a lot of different people. Well, we know that viruses are known to mutate. I think it's in the news every year that there's certain strains that the flu vaccine wasn't able to do. And we know that viruses are kind of smart in a way that they'll mutate. So we've had some new viruses, strains and mutations coming out of Great Britain. We've seen them in the news about South Africa. But new findings show that these current strains are mutating, and we know that they actually are becoming a little bit more, I would say, able to infect others a little bit more quickly, and they're a little more contagious. And so that's something that we're keeping an eye on. And I know that from the vaccine, the public health perspective, we're looking at this too. But the good news is these new strains have been studied in a lab, and I think Moderna just produced this data earlier this week, that both Pfizer and Moderna have studied this in labs, and they've recognized that these approved vaccines will be effective against these new strains. They're trying to figure out, is it 95% effectiveness, but it will be effective. And the other good news is if any time they find out that in laboratory data, new strains aren't effective with the COVID-19 vaccine, the vaccine is built really easy, and it's almost kind of like you have the structure of the vaccine that you can just plug in a little bit more messenger RNA, and you can immediately have it ready to go again. And so, in other words, the vaccine's built to be effective and kind of versatile. But for right now, we actually don't need to change the vaccine for these new strains that we're finding because the current vaccine is effective. And really the way they do that is they take individuals that have been vaccinated with the COVID-19, they extract that serum, extract the blood, the white blood cells, take it into a laboratory and expose it to the strain. And that's really the best way they've been able to see it and see how effective it is in eliminating the virus. And so I think this is something that's important for you all to know because you're seeing it in the news, you're seeing it as kind of an emerging area of COVID, and I want you to feel comfortable to be able to speak to it and understand the technology behind the delivery of messenger RNA and how that can be updated if needed, but at the same time recognize the benefits of the current COVID-19 vaccine in its delivery. So why should I get vaccinated? I hear this question all the time, and my job here, you know, it's to be objective, but in the same way, I want you to make the best decision for you, your family member, and yourself to make sure you have all the data there, but also recognize that getting vaccinated is bigger than just yourself. It's really a public health crisis, and the way we can get back to normal, reduce our hospitalization rates, reduce the amount of deaths, and reduce the amount of comorbidities and people out of work and healthcare workers out of work is getting vaccinated. So getting vaccinated will protect yourself from becoming seriously ill. And I think another thing I want to put out there is people talk about the long-term side effects of the vaccine. And I think, I got to address that, and I appreciate the interest in that. But a lot of people don't know, what are the long-term side effects if you do contract COVID-19? We really don't know that yet. And I think that's something that we also need to study. And I think it's interesting that, with COVID-19, there's people around you. And if you get vaccinated, you're able to reduce the spread, and you can reduce that spread for the ones you love most, right? And those are our populations that are maybe the elderly, immunocompromised, cystic fibrosis children. I think of all those types of individuals that could be at risk. And this is our way to decrease that and minimize the spread, so that they have a decreased risk for severe illness. If you've had COVID-19 before and you say, hey, I want to go through it the old fashioned way and let my body process it, more power to you. I do not want to. And actually what we found is people that have gotten COVID, about 90 days later, they can be reinfected. And I know several people, actually know people that have been infected around 3 times over the course of the last year. And that's really significant. They've been out at work, they've been sick, loved ones, they've been able to spread it to loved ones. And that's something that no one wants to do. But after you get vaccinated, your risk of contracting it is actually extremely low. And even if you do have COVID-19, the more people are vaccinated, the more your bodies will clear it, and the less chance the virus has of traveling through multiple individuals and traveling through families. And that's our goal, is to stop the spread, create more of that herd immunity, and allow us to get more back to normal sooner than later. So question, I know many of you are thinking this, wondering this, or maybe this was a question that was coming in while I'm talking. So after I'm vaccinated, I can stop wearing my mask, right? Unfortunately, no. I'm 3 weeks out from being vaccinated, and I have to wear my mask every day, and I will continue to wear my mask. Those that have been vaccinated still need to wear their mask. You still need to wash your hands. You still need to socially distance around others as the vaccine's being rolled out. I know I'm part of that phase 1A group. I'm lucky and appreciative that I had the chance to get vaccinated and protect my loved ones and the ones around me. But at the same time, I recognize that scientists aren't sure if I can still contract COVID-19. I might not have any symptoms. My body may clear it very soon, but I still potentially could spread the vaccine. And especially when there's so many people out there that are still unvaccinated that don't have that precious chance to get vaccinated, that I could contract it to them. So right now, we're still going to have to wear our masks. As we roll out the vaccines, and as more people get vaccinated throughout the rest of this year, there is the potential for us to not have to wear masks in the future and kind of do away with social distancing. Do I always think there'll be somewhat of social distancing? Probably. But the more we can stop the spread, get that herd immunity, protect others, the quicker we're going to get back to that quote unquote normal. So, as I wrap up my presentation, one of the things I want to do is lead you with this image. I mentioned I live in Atlanta, and I think the vaccine, doing all of our important socially distance, washing hands, wearing masks are extremely important. But really, to see that light at the end of the tunnel, to see that light up where we can start to return back to the life that we lived prior to this pandemic, the vaccine's really going to be the answer for that. And so I encourage you, if you have employees, if you have loved ones, really have these conversations with them, get to the facts, because it's so important that we have healthcare workers to care for our loved ones. And the more they're not vaccinated, the more we're going to have short staffing, the more it's going to be difficult to get people to care for our loved ones, which is so important. And the more we get our loved ones vaccinated, the more it can reduce the traveling, the more it can reduce the severe illnesses that we're having to care for, and the spikes and surges in the hospitalizations that are really wearing people out. So with that being said, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Melissa, and thank you all so much for your time and listening to my presentation.
Dr. Haumschild, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Great information. You did a fantastic job of really simplifying the facts for everyone, and the visuals were outstanding. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we do have quite a few questions. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a two-part question. What I'm going to do for everyone watching, again, if you're joining us late, you can submit your questions at the bottom in the Q&A box. Some people have been utilizing the chat box. That is also fine. If I find a couple of questions that seem similar, I will group them together. And this is one of those questions. So I'm flip-flopping back and forth between the chat and the Q&A. So the question I want to put together is this. If I had COVID, do I need to wait 90 days before getting the vaccine? This person had a mild case. The second part to that is if you had COVID, had to wait the 90 days, if you were hospitalized and treated with plasma, should somebody wait? Do they have to wait? And why would they have to wait? How is that different if they were treated with plasma as opposed to those who were not treated with plasma?
Great questions, Melissa. Let me talk to the first one. So commonly the CDC kind of spoke to the 90-day rule of waiting 90 days. And actually it has nothing to do with your immune system, but we start to see new data that people that were infected by COVID-19 have a very minimal chance of being reinfected within 90 days. So in other words, your natural immunity will hang on for 90 days. And as we're kind of stratifying supply, we want to give it to people that really don't have the immunity right now. So if you have low chances of getting reinfected within 90 days, we're asking you to wait. And that's really where that clearly comes from. But if you have the opportunity to be vaccinated and someone's willing to give you that vaccine, you can receive a vaccination and not wait the 90 days after you've contracted COVID. And the body's going to work the same as it would without it. The only reason with that is how we're going to preserve our supply. And then the second piece was with the plasma. Do you need to wait to get it done? I would say the same thing is if you've gotten the convalescent plasma, if you've been treated with it before, I still think you can get the vaccine. You may have some questions because you may have better immunity than others when you sign up to get it at your local county or healthcare facility. But for me, I would still encourage you to go get the vaccine and to go ahead and get registered for it and protect yourself, even in addition to the convalescent plasma.
Next question comes from Laura. She says, we hear about the vaccine's effectiveness for the overall population. Is there data on effectiveness for those over 65? Is it different for the different vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, et cetera?
That's a great question. I think in the clinical trial, we do have it broken out data by elderly, so greater than 65 years of age. And I don't have that in front of me, but what I can tell you is it's still pretty consistent, ranging from about that 93 to 95% coverage. And even with patients that are immunocompromised, we're still seeing some really great effects within the inclusion criteria of the study. So to answer your question, I don't have that in front of me, but I think even for the elderly population, it's been very effective, greater than 90%, probably ranging from 93 to 95% in those that it was studied in.
Deidre wants to know, can you still take the vaccine if you had an allergic reaction to a flu shot?
So if you've had an allergic reaction to a flu shot, that's going to be a question. You might want to talk with your healthcare provider, but what I will say is those that have had a reaction prior, we try to score that reaction. Was it anaphylaxis? Was it a rash? What was that? And that'll be triggered when you fill out your screening form. And if you had a reaction, it wasn't considered anaphylaxis, or even if it was, they may pre-medicate you, or they may just say, come in and we're going to monitor you. And a lot of what you're going to find is at your vaccine facilities, they're going to have an EpiPen and some diphenhydramine, or Benadryl, so that you can be medicated afterwards. And you're going to have that longer post-observation period. So again, you may want to reach out to your provider that oversees you, but you're still going to fill that out in the form. It's going to be flagged. And there are healthcare professionals and providers, MDs, DOs, PAs, APPs, PharmDs that are going to be on site at the facility. And they will assess your reaction before you get the vaccine to make sure you fit the criteria and they're prepared for any type of side effects.
Okay, and to follow up on that question, somebody else asked about their father, who is 86 years old, had an allergic reaction to a flu shot, but he's got some allergies like penicillin, mushrooms, and there are some concerns there. So does it follow along the same lines of what you just said?
It kind of follows the same lines. I would say if there's penicillin allergies, a lot of people have different allergies to antibiotics and things that are going on. And actually what you're allergic to is actually not the kind of mRNA messenger and the lipid, it's the carrier fluid. And so depending on which vaccine you get, you can go ahead and look and see, okay, what flu vaccine did I get? What is this one? Your healthcare professional can say, hey, this is propylene glycol, or this is a different type of carrier fluid that carries that vaccine. And it's really kind of it's really just a carrier fluid that you really react to. So we would do that evaluation, but in terms of the penicillin allergy, the mushroom allergy, that would not relate to the vaccine. And they would mainly look at the flu vaccine, look at which one you got and see if there's a comparison there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question for the individual who sent that. I also have a penicillin allergy and sulfa-based drugs, so that is something that would concern me. Obviously, looking ahead to getting the vaccine myself. Great answer, thank you. Moving along now, we have a question here. It says, "Hi, I'm 74 years old, I'm female, great health. However, I'm just recovering from a bout of winter urticaria. How long should I wait before getting the vaccine? Should I wait for Johnson and Johnson's vaccine?"
Yeah, if you got urticaria, I still would encourage you to go get vaccinated. I don't think there's a reason to wait, and I think the side effects of contracting COVID-19, even with that, could be worse. So my opinion is to go ahead and sign up, get the vaccine, and the Johnson and Johnson vaccine we're hoping comes out soon. I'm a big fan of getting more vaccines in the market,
Sure.
but I think Moderna or Pfizer are still going to be great options for you.
Okay. Let's see. Laura asks, "Is the effectiveness of the vaccine lower for someone that is immunosuppressed?"
That's a great question. I don't have that teased out data from the clinical trials of Moderna and Pfizer, but what I would say is it's even more important for someone to get the vaccine if they're immunosuppressed, especially because they're really that target population that could be most susceptible. And one of the, I guess, other things is when someone gets the vaccine, their reactogenicity that I spoke about, their reaction will actually be lower because their immune system's a bit blunted.
Mhm.
So I would say if someone's immunocompromised, it's tough to tease out exactly what it's going to be, but in my opinion, it's going to give you the best chance of avoiding COVID-19 and being susceptible to getting the virus, even if it might be a little bit lower if you look at that subpopulation that's kind of pulled out from the trial. So get it done. You may have less of a reaction, and you're going to even more protect yourself, whether it's 90% to 95%.
Okay, and now we're going to bring up an interesting question because you did have that chart of the differences between the flu shot, shingles, and obviously these coronavirus vaccines. Ellen asks, "I was scheduled to get the second shingles vaccine next week, but now she's got an appointment to get the Pfizer COVID vaccine tomorrow. She wants to do that. How long should I wait?" is the question, "after I get the second COVID vaccine, so that I can go out and get the shingles vaccine? Should it be 4 weeks or more?"
Well, so first off, thank you for getting your vaccinations. Even for the shingles vaccine, as someone that works in the public health field, I'm really proud of you. And great question. So currently, the CDC is recommending that people wait 2 weeks after vaccine. And so if you got your COVID vaccine, I would follow it. But in my opinion, the CDC is being very conservative with that comment. Because we get multiple vaccines all the time, and your body's going to be able to still respond even if you get multiple vaccines at the same time. But the main reason they're saying that is so that we can look at the symptoms and spread them out a little bit. And that way, there's not confusion if you get multiple vaccines at the same time. What was the reaction from, and if you have kind of anaphylaxis or things like that. So to boil it down, I would wait 2 weeks just to be on the safe side. And then you can go ahead and get the shingles vaccine after that.
Okay, great. Dennis and Lucy have joined us. Thank you for watching today and for sharing your evening with all of us. They ask, "We were told the vaccine doesn't prevent us from spreading the virus, only protects us from getting too sick." And I know that that's something we've all heard. So can you maybe set the record straight on that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's more studies to figure out, can we still spread the virus if we've been vaccinated? I'm 3 weeks post my second vaccination, so fully vaccinated. I wear a mask all the time. I think we're still waiting on that data to get out there, but the good news is my body's going to attack that virus rather quickly and get rid of it. But while it's doing that, there is the potential that I could spread it to others. So that's a fair comment. The great thing about herd immunity is once we all get vaccinated and we clear the virus really quickly, it doesn't have the chance to spread as fast through the population. And all of a sudden you start to see it die out. And that's really our goal. So in summary, you still need to wear your mask. You can still potentially spread it to loved ones. But hopefully in the future, once we get herd immunity, that spread will be minimal to nothing.
Okay, great answer. Thank you for the question, Dennis and Lucy. We've got about 15 minutes, everyone, until we reach the top of the hour. We will continue with questions and comments through that time. So if you have anything you want to ask, anything you want to say, this is the time to do so. Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Type them out. We'll read them to the doctor. Okay, we're moving on to Selva. I've had my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. I'm in fairly good health, 89 years old. Excellent. My daughter, 57, wants me to visit in March. Should I quarantine in her house for 2 weeks before I take off my mask? I live in Miami. She lives in Dallas.
So if you're going to go visit her, I would recommend if you've been fully vaccinated, your chances of contracting the virus are probably about 5%. The worry you have there is your daughter. You want to be concerned about her and making sure that you haven't spread the virus to her. So quarantining at this point is really difficult because you don't know if you've contracted the virus or not now that you received both doses. So I don't know how much that's going to benefit, but I would encourage you to mask when you're with your daughter, even if she gets the second vaccine, because there is that still small 5% chance. But I don't know if quarantining is going to be as important once you receive that second vaccination, but more so just wearing your mask to protect her.
Okay. And back to Dennis and Lucy, and I should have followed this up with their last question, but they asked, can we take antihistamine or Tylenol after the vaccine shot?
You can definitely take it after the vaccine shot if you want. Typically, I don't like to take Tylenol after it because I want my body to mount that immune response. And we talked about that earlier. You see a little bit of fever and temperature. Your body's still going to mount an immune response. But if it tends to get a little too much, I think Tylenol is totally appropriate. Or if you want to take a little Benadryl or a first or second generation antihistamine like Claritin or Zyrtec, I think that's going to be totally appropriate.
Okay. Now, Marion has a great question. We've been hearing this a lot in the news. So people, healthcare workers, those in the first segment of the population A or whatever it's called, you had mentioned it earlier, are getting their vaccine shots, the first dose. And then we're starting to find that the supplies are really limited. So then figuring out where to get that second dose. And it may not be within that 2-week window. So Marion asked, I got my first vaccine last Monday. They told me I can wait a month to get the second shot, but it could go 6 weeks after that before she could get the next one. She says, I don't know of any research that supports this, and it sounds hypothetical to me. What are your thoughts?
So great question. I'm assuming you got the Moderna vaccine because you're waiting 4 weeks. Congratulations on getting that done. So to answer your question, typically the recommendation per the clinical trial was 28 days. So that's 4 weeks. So that fits it good. But what we're finding is that there's more data coming out, but you can actually push it out further. And there's actually going to be some guidance that comes out with that, mainly because we know how vaccines work, right? In general, you get primed and then you kind of get that solid immunological response on the second dose. And so I would even say that 6 weeks is actually going to be okay. And there's going to be some guidance with that. I think you have even up to 7 days. But I know in countries like Great Britain, they're rolling it out where first dose everywhere, and they're going to push out the second dose even further out, depending on how supply comes in. And I think both strategies are viable, but for you specifically, if you have to wait 6 weeks, I still think you're going to be fine. And we think about the way it works in the body. Since you've already had that primer and had that exposure, you will still be effective 6 weeks out, even though that's not what was studied in the clinical trial.
And I like to follow up on that too, because a few weeks ago, it was again in the news that because we were so limited in supplies with the vaccine, that they were having the doses so that they could give more people more shots. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a full believer in giving the full dose, and so we've definitely gone that route. I actually don't have experience with giving half doses, and I think when I looked into kind of the local areas, some of the counties and health systems, all of them are pulling up the full dose. You may hear something though, Melissa, about people getting 6 doses out of a 5-dose vial. That's actually completely okay, and that's how we're stretching the full dose to more people. And there's actually more overfill in the vials or extra drug that's in there. And so really your savvy pharmacist are able to actually get 6 doses out, and all 6 of those doses are full doses when you think about it on an individual basis, and they're all fully effective.
Okay. Heidi has a question. What is the minimum age that is safe to get the vaccine? Obviously, we have a lot of people with children and those with grandchildren who may be watching.
Yeah, it's really important. I have 2 daughters myself, so it's on my mind all the time. Right now, I think it's recommended 18 and over. I have to look between the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. I think one has a little bit of a younger age on it, but right now it's adults. And with children, there is actually kind of a statement coming from the Pediatric Society that they need to be studying this in children, because even if children don't express symptoms, they can be carrier COVID-19, and we've seen that across the board. So I'm with you on that one. I'm really hoping that we take the right steps further to study it in the pediatric or children patient population, and that way we can also get them vaccinated so we truly can kind of snuff out this COVID-19 spread.
Yeah, and then as we wind down here, I think that may be the last of the questions. So I have a question for you here. So if somebody wants to slide into home base here at the last minute, that's great. But I would like to get your personal thoughts on. We talked about Operation Warp Speed and how quickly this all rolled out, and now we're very quickly trying to get the doses in as many arms as possible. As someone who has been doing this a while, who has seen how long this research can take. Can you tell me your personal thoughts, maybe how, if you're proud, or your thoughts on just getting to this point so quickly?
Yeah, we're it's definitely almost unreal, and I get why some people in the population that may not be in the medical field may have a little bit of concerns initially, because we wait on so many medications for cancer, for antibiotics, et cetera, and sometimes they take so long that we have to participate in these long clinical trials. But I'm really proud of the way that the research were able to work together, and I think we're so fortunate, Melissa, that the NIH had already been studying this mRNA kind of vehicle, and biotech that was working with Pfizer, they had already been studying this in cancer, and they were so quickly able to jump in. And I don't know if people have read the story about it, but it's pretty moving, where they quickly shifted their labs, had all their team members coming in, were working 12-hour days, no vacation, to make sure that they could roll out this technology and get it studied in the clinical trial. And I'm also proud of Warp Speed, the way we were able to still study things, and the FDA was able to have good oversight of all the clinical data, but they were able to get it done in an expeditious fashion, so that within a year, we have a vaccine now that's providing 95% immunity. I think that's pretty groundbreaking. And I know for the health of our population and my loved ones, I'm extremely proud to be a part of it.
I love that. And then the last question I have for you is, we talk about the shortages, right? And now we're hoping to turn that corner there. So will we turn that corner? Will we have enough doses for everyone where we can get to the next segment of the population?
I think they're trying to roll out doses as fast as possible. And you may have heard in the news, some places, oh, they have enough drug, but they're not able to get vaccinated. I think we're learning, how do we mass vaccinate people as fast as possible? It's been exciting to see the way it's done. I'm hopeful that more doses will continue to be manufactured, and also that the Johnson and Johnson, the AstraZeneca, and other manufacturers will introduce vaccine in the market, so that we can continue to vaccinate people as soon as possible, and kind of reduce the spread in the public. So to be honest with you, Melissa, if it's only the two manufacturers, I think we're going to have steady state. I think we're trying to meet demand by working through the phases. But as soon as those other manufacturers get that emergency use approval, I think it will absolutely speed up the process. And I'm super hopeful by the end of this year, I'll be around my loved ones, potentially without a mask, or at least around them with everyone being healthy.
Yeah, we do have some questions that came in here at the last minute. So on masks, let's stay there for a second. Dennis and Lucy ask, they say the new thought is that fabric masks are not good. We should use surgical masks. How many hours are these good for?
Yeah, it really gets tough with masks, because you need to wash them. You need to make sure they're taken care of appropriately. And sometimes if someone's wearing the same fabric mask all the time, is getting that expectorant and things on it, sometimes it may not be as effective as a surgical mask. And I know that there's some ongoing studies right now looking at what is the transmission through a mask, even not just for flu, but for COVID-19. I think your surgical masks are some of the best. And otherwise, I would say looking at those 3 and 2-layer masks that are made out of maybe not cotton, but fabric, is going to be the most important piece. So that's what I would focus people to work on. Make sure they exchange their mask, wash them well. Try not to have cotton, because the fibers are a little porous, and I think that's what people are seeing. And if a surgical mask is available, use that. But at the end of the day, any mask is better than no mask. And I know a lot of people are getting a lot better about that, but I really want to emphasize that point.
Excellent. Marvin asks, how much time should be allowed between vaccination and epidural injection?
Vaccination, epidural injection. To me, I think I would wait maybe just to see the side effects, give it a day or two to see if there's any rashes there. You could potentially, if you want to be super conservative, follow the CDC's requirement of 2 weeks if it's an elective procedure or medication. But otherwise, once I get that vaccine, I may wait. But if you have an epidural injection, if you have Crohn's and you have Humira or all these different medications, you can still do them same day. And just be aware to monitor the symptoms, monitor where you inject, And because if there are hives or rash, you want to make sure you can differentiate them between the vaccine and your normal medication. But in my book, if you're taking a daily injectable medication in the skin, go ahead and just continue that and be adherent with your other medications, even if you've gotten the vaccine.
All right, and I want to make sure we get to this. I know you already discussed this. We already had this question, but in case somebody came in late, someone anonymous asked if I had COVID and can donate plasma, should I wait to get the vaccine?
If you can donate plasma, I would encourage you to still get the vaccine. I think that's going to be super important. You're still going to mount antibodies in your system. I would encourage you to get the vaccine because your chances of spreading it to other may do more harm than holding off to donate the plasma.
Excellent. And the last one is a comment, and it is a huge, huge, huge thank you to you, Dr. Haumschild. Ryan, we appreciate you so much. You have done an excellent job in simplifying all of this information so that our viewers can understand, I can understand, we can all understand. And that's what we're here to do, to share knowledge and give the facts. And you have done that in an excellent way today. So thank you so much for taking the time with us here this evening. And for those of you watching, we hope that this presentation has helped you with your concerns and questions. We do want to let everybody know this webinar will be sent to you in an email link tomorrow. So you can feel free to share with your family, friends, whoever you want to share this information with. Get it out there so that everybody has the facts on these coronavirus vaccines. Doctor, thank you so much. As always, we appreciate all of you watching and sharing your time here at Senior Living Live. Have a great day, everybody.